It's very quiet as I speak. There's no sound anywhere. I won't say anything more, but maybe that if you listen to my last upload to the YouTube, you will maybe understand why I say that. Quiet and peacefulness are good things. Good things happen during that time. It's a shame that our society has gotten to be such that we surround ourselves with a lot of noise, chatter, just a lot of stuff that interferes. There was a point in my career, teaching career, that even though I wasn't trained in as a speech teacher, they asked me to teach a speech class for a part of a year, and I don't know what my students learned, to be quite honest, but I learned something very important. The thing that I learned was that speech, when you think about what it is, it's just somebody encoding. I guess another way to say that would be originating. Somebody originating a message. And then there's some sound waves produced that go out through the air. And on the other end, they are decoded. So there's an encoding and a decoding. Well, a lot of what we've been talking about is messaging. And I hope that I've made the point that the Lord is trying to message us regularly and very interpersonally. That might be hard to comprehend when you think about how all the people on this earth. And we'll maybe have a chance to talk more about it in depth someday, because there's a way to understand that so that it makes sense. But he does that very interpersonally. And if you listen to the last YouTube, you heard me talk about how I observed in nature, again, the values that come from observing nature, like Henry David Thoreau did, like Ralph Waldo Emerson advocated for. We transcend. We start to understand on a spiritual level something that we didn't understand before. And if you watch that upload, you heard me talk about the sun on the horizon and my observations of it each day, and the fact that the sun came up on Black Mountain. There's a significance, I think, even to the name of that mountain. On Black Mountain Peak, that sun came up on February the 14th, the day on the calendar when everybody's celebrating love. Well, you'd have to listen to that video to comprehend that. But what I was getting at, I'm not going to just repeat again. But from that whole experience, it was made known to me that the Lord wanted to speak to me individually about the significance of love and his involvement in it. It would take longer than I have tonight to talk about it, but if you stay with me as I move forward with this whole project and everything that's on my mind, everything that I've learned, you'll come to find out that there is a reason for that, and it's real. We talk about things as they really are. The fact that we want, in fact, maybe I ought to just read that passage again. I think I got it here in front of me. This one right here. If you stand right fronting and face to face to a fact, you will see the sun glimmer on both its surfaces as if it were a scimitar and feel its sweet edge dividing you through the heart and marrow. I felt the sweet edge dividing me through the heart and marrow when I came to understand why I would recognize the Lord's hand in a sun coming up right over the point of the peak of Black Mountain. And it's as though he were speaking directly to me. I've talked to you about the fact that the Lord is real and that he sends messages. And I posed the question once again, why does he send those messages? Why? Why does he care? What's love got to do with it? There's a verse in a song that says, what love got to do with it? But I asked myself, what's love got to do with it? As I've gone on and learned a whole lot about Jesus and the reason he did what he did, why he's doing what he's doing, and that he's doing it individually for every one of us if we just give him some quiet time. Stop crowding the airwaves. Let the message, after he encodes it, come to us and help us decode it the way he said it, for what it really means individually to us. There are two words I don't speak Spanish, but there are two words in Spanish that I've come to understand a little bit and appreciate. Those two words are, if I'm saying them correctly, Saber and Conocer. I'm sure if a Spanish person were here, he'd say them slightly differently than that. But I'll say them again. Saber or Conocer. If you know Spanish, you'd know that though they have similar, I should say associated meanings, yet they don't mean the same thing. To my knowledge, we don't have that exact same wording in our language, because this is what I've come to understand those words to mean. Saber means to know about. So if I know about something, then saber would be a good word to use. However, if I conocer something, to my understanding, that word means to know intimately or profoundly. there's a much deeper level of knowing. I think the whole Christian world would say they know about Saber, Jesus Christ. But I think the goal for all of us is to take that to the next level and know him intimately and know him on a very personal level. I have 12, well, actually 24, because they all got married. On my father's side of the family, there were 12 children. They are my uncles and my aunts. There are some of those that I've rarely seen and know very little about. There are others of those aunts and uncles that I spent a lot of time working for and working with, and sitting at their dinner table and hearing their stories, listening to them explain what they know about life, listening to their hardships and their trials, how their families are being raised, what's going on with all their children. I've listened to them talk to me about how they gained a testimony. And I've listened to them explain the economic hardships that they've had, how they overcame them. I could go on and on and on about some of those aunts and uncles. So I guess on some level I could say I conocer them. I know them more intimately, more personally. But there are others of those aunts and uncles, like I said, that I've rarely seen. And if they said anything to me at all, it was just hello. And I've never spent any time with them. And they haven't seemed to have all that much interest in me. They never said much or did much as far as having personal time with me. So Saber might be a better word to use for that kind of relationship. So then I ask the question, if we're talking about why the Lord messages us, it's because, in my mind, he wants to have a relationship with us on the Conocer level. We can go into the scriptures and read his name and read about the stories and the parables and all kinds of things. The whole world has stories about Jesus, his birth, his death, the things he taught. The things he wanted us to learn, his disciples, how he fed people, how he healed them, how he raised them from the dead. All of those things, they're in the scriptures. In the scriptures, they're ink on a page. And though we might be entertained by them, they still kind of remain just on the level of ink on a page. Should we say Saber relationship, until we start to internalize what's there into our own lives and listen to the messaging that's coming from Jesus Christ. Every single day, there is an encoding, multiple encodings. The question is, what about the decodings? Is the message being decoded on our end? And do we recognize it for what it is? That it's a personal message, that it's meant for us, that it's not just meant for the masses. It's not like some loudspeaker in a crowd. It's not that way at all. It's a quiet, still voice that comes to us in times like this when it's quiet. Because he wants Conocer relationship with us, not Saber. There's not much warmth in a Saber relationship. There is a whole lot of warmth in a Conocer relationship. So when we hear a voice, that comes to our heart and mind, and we respond to that voice, then we've decoded the encoded message. And when we hear that, just as happened with the story that I asked you to go to about the Arabian horse obedience training allegory, just as that horse responded to the message, if we respond to the message, then good things happen. Now, my last time I spent with you in a message called The Fourth Watch, or the upload, I spoke to you about a scripture that I don't have to look down to read. I can tell it to you off by heart. Much like the scripture that my dad told me at the kitchen table that I've discussed with you. That the scripture that he said was, I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say, and when you do not what I say, ye have no promise. Let that sink in for a bit. But then this scripture, and you'll note the similarities. The interesting thing about all of this is, and I think the reason that I'm starting now to talk what's in the scriptures more is because, we were talking about nature and the transcendental movement and understanding our spiritual selves, and as opposed to just our physical desires and wants and needs, trying to figure out who we are as spiritual beings, transcending to that level, thus being a transcendentalist with the innate power to know truth intuitively. It's profound. And that truth is being encoded. Our job is to decode it, and like the Arabian horse, act upon what the decoding was. If we can do that faithfully, then we've accomplished what we were sent to this earth to do. Now I'm going to read a scripture that verifies what I just said, if I can find it. It's a scripture from the book of Abraham. And here it is. Okay, now, so recall what I just said. Recall what I just said in the scripture that my dad quoted me. I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say. And when you do not what I say, you have no promise. And the scripture that I quoted you last time was actually from Doctrine and Covenants, section 130. And that scripture says, there is a law, not some laws, but a law. There is a law irrevocably decreed before the foundations of this world. We had a pre-existence. Our spirits existed before this world came into being, was formed. Think about that. Think about who you really are. And when we obtain any blessing from God, it is by obedience to that law upon which it is predicated. There is a law upon which all blessings are predicated. And when we obtain any blessing from God, it is by obedience to that law upon which it was predicated. Now you might say, hold on. Just my existence is a blessing. What law did I obey to get that blessing? If that scripture's true, tell me the law. Well, the law was a message in the pre-existence that there's a plan for you down on earth, and we think it will help you advance. We think it'll help make you a better person. Would you like to go? I've contemplated myself in that meeting where that was proposed, and I sometimes have even closed my eyes, and in my mind's eye tried to visualize me in that meeting and see what my countenance was like, see how I reacted. Since I'm here, I must have chosen to buy into that plan, that messaging that was intended for me. Yes, for lots of others, but for me. Because I was invited individually. Do you want to go? I don't know if any of you have seen them. Photograph where the Voyager, I forget how many millions upon millions of miles it is away from Earth now, but it escaped the solar system nearly a decade or more ago, and it's been sailing out there in space, and at one point it took a picture back towards the planet Earth. If you want to see that picture, just Google Voyager blue dot photograph. I think those words will get you to that picture. And what you will see is way, 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 way off in the distance. You'll almost have to strain your eyes to see it, but you'll see a little blue dot. Well, guess what that little blue dot is? You got it right. That little blue dot, almost a pinprick type dot at that distance, was Earth. And again, I like to use my mind's eye, but I think to myself, what if I was out there somewhere when this plan was explained and they asked if I wanted to go? I wonder if that little blue dot photograph was somewhere near what it looked like at that time when I was trying to make my decision. Would you like to go? Well, thank goodness for Scripture, because when we observe things in nature, like the Voyager did when it took that picture, it gives us an awareness, something to think about. This is what it says in the book of Abraham about our little sojourn here on earth. She says, speaking of our earthly experience to come, says this, Abraham 3:20, verse 25, and we will prove them now herewith to see if they will do all things, whatever the Lord their God shall command them. Now, if you can't see the connecting dots between these three scriptures that I've quoted, I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say, and when you do not what I say, you have no promise. There is a law irrevocably decreed before the foundations of this world upon which all blessings are predicated. And when we obtain any blessing from God is by obedience to that law upon which it is predicated. Perhaps that obedience was saying, yes, I'll go in the pre-existence. And so we're here, receiving the blessing for that choice. We're heeding the message that was given to us there while we were looking at the blue dot way off in the distance. And then the verse that I just read. And we will prove them now herewith to see if they will do all things whatsoever the Lord their God shall command them. We will prove them. Think of the Arabian horse obedience training allegory. Watch it again. That horse was being proven. And we're being proven day in and day out with things that might seem a little harder yesterday than they were today. That's how muscles grow, isn't it? By adding a little more weight and doing a few more of the repetitions as we exercise. By doing that, a muscle grows. So in nature, we observe that. We buy into that. But if we can transcend now into the spiritual realm, the same thing applies. We get more repetitions. We get a little weightier decisions to make. And just like the Arabian horse, if we can prove ourselves herewith to see, anyway, in Abraham, if we can prove ourselves herewith to see if they will do all things which the Lord their God commanded them. If you don't see those dots lining up, the marvelous thing about Scripture and observance of nature and just hearing truths sometimes from others, maybe me in these videos, if you listen carefully, I hope there's some truth coming out, because that's what I'm after. The arrows start to line up, and there's multiple witnesses, and you get a confirmation. Just like when we're putting the pieces of the puzzle together, you get a confirmation that right there is where that piece goes, and it enhances the quality of that picture, that puzzle, immensely. Well, that puzzle sometimes could be compared to our lives, our beings. Our physical selves, yes. Our temporal activities, yes. But what the Lord's really concerned about is whether we will do all things whatsoever he commands us. The choice is ours. Sometimes it's a fleeting choice, but it's our choice. The question is, do we believe, or do we have what the Scriptures refer to constantly, and that is, or do we have unbelief? Look that one up in the index to the Scriptures someday. Unbelief, and you'll find out that it's tied to a lot of Scriptures that talk about the undoing of folks in the Scriptures. They received their reward based on unbelief. Therefore, they maybe reaped the whirlwind instead of what they were expecting life to be. That doesn't mean that everything that is bad that happens to us is because of that. And I'll talk more about that another time. I know at the end of the previous video, the one called Fourth Watch, I had a premonition, and I even said it. I said, the next time we'll talk about adversity. And I've received a prompting between now and then to hold off a bit. I don't know. You know what? I've told you I say my prayers when I do these, and one of the things I pray for, because I know my inadequacies and I know my imperfect self, one of the things I pray for is that my tongue will be loosed, that my mind might be clear, that I might be able to discern and use wisdom and receive the Lord's help as I present these via this YouTube channel. It's been an interesting ride so far, and the ride's just getting started. In fact, I'm not sure we're even mounted yet, but in addition to those things that I ask, and I think it was because of prompting while I was saying my prayer about it, one of the things that I ask is that if my performance or my looks, for heaven's sakes, interfere with what my intended message is to be from for you, and it's not. I don't want you to think of this as my message. I'd really like you to involve the source of that message if it rings true for you. Consider that it's not just me with my imperfections, but the message is actually for you, and that if you listen carefully, you'll be able to get the message decoded and heed what the message was. Because you will be, quote, proven now herewith to see if they will do all things which the Lord their God commands them. The very purpose for our signing up, our raising our hand, or whatever we did in the pre-existence to say, I want to go on that blue dot ride. There's something there for me, and I know I can't get it any other way. And yes, there will be trials. There will be affliction, which we'll, like I said, we'll talk about real soon. But it's all for my benefit. And because of the messaging that I received there in that pre-existent world, because of the messaging that I received personally with Conocer relationship, not Saber, but Conocer relationship. Because of that relationship, I knew that this plan was personally drawn up for me. Holy cow. Just stop and think about that for a minute when things are calm and quiet. Go off somewhere, sit on a rock, whatever you have to do, put your hand under your chin, like the thinker statue does. And just think about that for a while. And then if you go on with me, we'll talk about what all of that entailed, if you don't already know, and many of you do. But we should never stop marveling at our own existence. When I wake up in the morning, I open my eyes, I take a deep breath, and I'm grateful that I was able to take that breath. It was a blessing. And then I think, and when we receive any blessing from God is by obedience to that law upon which it is predicated. And that takes me to the pre-existence where I obeyed when a message was given for my benefit. When I obeyed, and it brought me to planet Earth along with you. And I'm grateful for every one of you. I love you more than you can even realize. If I stop and think about it too long, there'll be a tear roll down my cheek, and so I'll stop right there. But Conocer relationships mean so much. And I feel so loved by God and by Jesus, who, if I had read a little bit further on in the scriptures, volunteered to help carry out that plan that was to take place on Blue Dot Earth. You just feel so loved, even with a single breath, if you stop and think about it, that the rest of the day turns out really, really good, as long as you don't let the clatter and the chaff and all the noise and doubt and disbelief enter in. It's my prayer that you won't, because the feeling is a wonderful feeling. And I wish it upon every single one of you. Good night. Come back.